Thank you for joining me in the telling of this story. This story takes place in the early 2000s when I was a young man traveling the world. The story itself is a consolidated version of a longer story. If you like stories like these, I kindly ask you to subscribe to this channel. It really helps out the channel, but also I know that the stories are worth telling. As long as the audience is interested, I will continue to tell them. I hope you enjoy, and I'll be back at the end of the story. It was my favorite jacket, handmade, burlap, by a Bedouin tribesman from somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and I got it for a fair trade. Somewhere in Morocco, the old Reeboks I had once worn were now on the feet of a nomad, and I, another nomad, traveled the world wearing the burlap jacket he himself had made. And that's how I ended up a turkey for Thanksgiving. Wait, let me back up a minute. It was autumn 2003, and I was fresh off the plane in Rome. With little effort, I made a few friends with some Bulgarians who offered me work in their local hostel. Expecting to stay in the hostel through the winter, I unpacked my bags and made myself at home, welcomed by new friends in one of the most beautiful cities on earth. But a few weeks later, having earned nothing yet, they abruptly changed their minds and kicked me out with no job and little money. I was shocked and frustrated. I quickly packed my bags and left behind my troubles. Fleeing Italy, I made my way into the Greek islands. There, I could see Turkey across the sea, and with just a few dollars, I paid a local salty fisherman to transport me across and into the Middle East. From this port town, the next bus to Istanbul wasn't to arrive for a few more hours. But time passes slow when you're alone on a cold Turkish November morning. I reached in my bag for my jacket, but my burlap savior wasn't there. I knew my luggage had been lighter, but now I knew why. Kicked out of the hostel, I'd left all my winter clothes unpacked in a drawer. It was going to be a long, cold winter indeed. With little money and no winter clothes, I was on my way to Istanbul. It was Thanksgiving, and I felt like a turkey. A few adventures later, and I had made my way back to the edge of the majestic Italian Alps, without a jacket in the dead of winter. But I was there because I had met a stranger earlier, and she had offered me a place to stay for the holidays if I needed it, with a generous Italian family. And for Christmas that year, Dagmar, the woman who had invited me in, noticed that I was cold, and she presented me with a new winter jacket as a gift. This was a simple, gray, and rather boring kind of jacket, but now armed with warm clothes, I ventured out, met some kids my age, and they took me snowboarding all across the Alpine mountains. Over the years, I went through more jackets, of course. This one was burnt up on a movie set. Another ended up stolen. Jackets, they can be lost, stolen, or burnt. But it seems they can also be given when you really need it. You see, I wrote this story while watching migrants flee from the Middle East into Europe during a war that betrayed them. They took the exact same passage I did between Lesvos, Greece, and a small town in Turkey. That's their story, and yet it is this story too. A story about fleeing, betrayal, and a lost jacket on a passage from Greece to Turkey. But it's also a story about the strangers on the other side, a warm jacket and a trip down a mountain that will never be forgotten. Because what becomes of these strangers who meet on such a passage? Well, they're no longer strangers. In fact, I owe the memories of my most beautiful experiences to strangers. After all, that's how we all start. So a year later, I ended up in Prague, where I finally established myself and settled for good. One night, I went to a local bar and hostel. As I sat there, watching a movie, I looked across the table and saw a familiar face. It was one of the Bulgarians who worked at the hostel in Rome where I'd left my burlap jacket. I spoke to him, and he remembered me. It seemed he had traveled up for the weekend, and here was serendipity looking directly into my soul, in another little hostel, smelling of raspberry tea and grog, here to teach me something, I am sure. But I never mentioned how they betrayed me, how they had promised me a job and then left me broke without my winter jacket. Nor did I ask if they could mail that lucky jacket back to me here in Prague. Instead, I zipped up the one Dagmar had given me, and I walked out the door. I was sad to have lost such a special jacket that had given me so many memories and traveled so far, but I can smile now because I know the lesson of these jackets. Somewhere, I am sure, there was a young traveler who went rummaging through his room in a little hostel in Rome, and there he found the coolest, luckiest travel jacket in the world. It was made by the hands of a nomad deep in the Sahara Desert and was traded for a pair of Reeboks. It was stylish and made of burlap. But that's not what makes it warm. I've met the hostility of friends, and I've met the hospitality of strangers. And what I know now is hospitality makes one not a stranger, and hostility makes one not a friend. No, the jacket is warm from something else. So I hope the next traveler wears it well. Thank you again for joining me in the story. The Tale of the Jackets is the story of each of us. We go through this world as temporary visitors. It's the memories we make and the people we share our experiences with that count. So I hope this story will give you some guidance and some wisdom. May your own journey serve you well. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please consider doing it. I have more stories on the way. Thank you for joining me.